You gotta give me one thing. I'm a scary judge of talent.
Adolphus Washington back-to-back plays.
The Detroit Pistons select Luke Kennard from Duke University.
Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the Triple Double Podcast. And today we have my good friend Brad Konerman joining us. Brad, I never know how to introduce you as to what you do these days. So Brad is involved in all things basketball in many different levels. How's that?
That's a good start. Working in sports and finance and kind of wherever those things cross.
Great. Well, we had Brad on the podcast on season 1. We talked a lot about coaching search firms, how college coaches get jobs, climbing the coaching ladder and everything. Really informative episode. I think our second episode ever. So Brad is a local guy here in Cincinnati, and today we're going to be joining you just talking about regional college basketball at the Division I level, talking about some different teams, what Brad thinks is going to happen this year as someone who follows, top prospects in terms of NBA draft stuff, as someone who follows top teams and having relationships with college coaches. So let's start off local. Let's start off, Brad, with the Cincinnati Bearcats, 31-5 last year, picked this year to finish second in the conference in the coaches poll. Lost 3 really good guys, 2 guys to the NBA on our rosters this year. What do you think about the Bearcats this year?
First and foremost, I was so happy last year watching the NBA draft and knowing that Gary Clark was a rotational player in the NBA, for him to get picked up by the Rockets, for him to get minutes, for him to play a role, not just on a NBA team, but a competitive championship level team. This year with UC, it comes down to offense. So year in, year out, UC is tough. They're physical. They're going to guard. This year, a guy like Jaron Cumberland goes from being the number 4 scoring option to probably the first guy. Kane Broome can score you in, and shoot you out of games. Trey Scott's kind of the third guy. It really depends on who's that second or third scorer, and can they compete offensively with teams in the American.
The Bearcats, offensively, Cumberland's going to have to be the guy. I mean, people listen to this podcast, whether they've watched a lot of UC or not, know him, being that he's a Wilmington kid, scores the ball, very recognizable. The other piece for them is going to be how some of the young kids come up, particularly the kid from Brooklyn, Keith Williams, the sophomore, didn't play a lot last year. The Trevor Moore kid from Houston as a sophomore can really shoot the ball. If those kids can come in and have an impact, like you said, Mick's got guys with length and athleticism that are going to defend, that are, UC type of kids, but it'd be interesting to see those type of guys.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that was the benefit last year. Some of those guys had a chance as freshmen to sit back and play on a really successful team, but play a smaller role. I think they get better in practice. And I think, like you said, Williams and Moore specifically are guys that can come in and knock down shots. Moore can guard. What else can they do to add to what that team can do to compete for a league title?
Well, Cincinnati's got a lot of new bodies. Well, not new bodies, but guys are going to be playing for the first time. Didn't play a lot last year. Xavier's got the same situation. Difference is with Cincinnati, you've got Cronin returning for, I believe it's his 13th year. At Xavier, you've got a new head coach, Chris Mack, obviously in Louisville. Travis Steele's the new head coach. Now, he's been at Xavier forever, but it'll be his first opportunity as a head coach. Had another great record last year, 29-6, second round of the tournament, but they're picked to finish 6th in the Big East this year, Brad.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's about right. For a team like UC that's had all sort of continuity, Xavier, with Travis moving a seat over, he was as involved as any assistant or associate coach in the country, and he was one of the best. And he's going to have a lot of success, but you're looking at an entirely new staff on the court. And Jonas Hayes has proved himself to be a complete champion already, just with recruiting, how he's dealing with players. And you will see him as a name as a head coaching candidate, specifically in the Southeast, come March and April. But when you lose the amount of scores that they lost, and having Kaiser Gates leave early, they're banged up with Quentin Gooden, Najee Marshall. Who knows if they're going to even play tomorrow or not. But I think you're going to see an odd mix of completely new staff, pretty much a new roster. With 3 grad transfers is pretty rare. Ryan Wellich is really one of the best pick and pop, standstill shooters you'll see, and he'll play a specific role. But the season comes down to a guy like Paul Scruggs or Tyreek Jones taking the next step. Najee Marshall, to me, is one of the most underrated players in the country. I think it's a potential first-round pick as a 3-and-D kind of guy, especially if he can go from being a good shooter to a great shooter. But right now, Xavier's that middle-of-the-pack team, and it's going to be a tough, November, December. But come March, I think they'll be knocking on the door of the tournament.
Well, it's a tough league, and you've got 2 of the last 3 national champions in Villanova coming out of that league. You've got a lot of other talent in that league, and they've got injuries. They've got guys who haven't played a lot. People talk about losing Trayvon Blewett and JP McCurra, 4-year guys. Blewett, 4-year starter, right? But it's also losing Kaiser Gates, 3-year guy. Losing Kareem Kanzer, who was a grad transfer, who had a hell of a year last year. So a lot of new bodies. Quentin Gooden is a really, really good college basketball player. The difference with Quentin Gooden this year is, can he score? We know he can do all the other things to help a team win. He did it at a high level last year. Can he add to the scoring column this year? I mean, I saw him a ton in high school, being that he was a Kentucky kid. He's able to do it, so I hope he is healthy and can do it. Agreed on Najee Marshall. Paul Scruggs, high-level talent, sophomore at Indianapolis, could turn the corner this year. And then Tyreek Jones has that physical presence that they're going to need. So we'll see what the grad transfers do. They'll be solid at Xavier. They're always going to find a way to win games.
And one thing to think in mind is that the Big East has changed a little bit this year. St. John's, DePaul, and Georgetown have almost been 3 guaranteed wins home and away. St. John's is much better. Georgetown's better. DePaul should even be a little better. The league's not as top heavy as it has been. So you're maybe losing one of those 2 kind of gimme games that you had the last couple years. So it's going to make a difference in how the standings pan out.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of guard talent in that league, as there always is, a lot of Northeast kids. And that's where we're going to see if, Gooden and Marshall and Scruggs, we're going to find out about them real early in the conference play without having McCurra and Blewett and whatnot to defer to. So moving on then, a little bit north of 71, the other high major program in Ohio, obviously Ohio State. 25-9 last year, also like the other 2 NCAA second round. I haven't seen a Big Ten poll yet, but if you look at the national polls, they look to be picked about 7th, 8th, maybe 1 or 2 spots higher or lower, depending on who you ask. Lost Keita Bates-Diop, lost Jayshawn Tate, lost Cam Williams. Very much like Xavier, Cincinnati don't return a lot of guys with a lot of experience, even after last year. What do you think about the Buckeyes?
I mean, I think last year, Chris Holman at Ohio State was one of the best stories in college basketball. I think him coming in late, bringing the staff with him, taking the roster as is, bringing basically Kyle Young over and Musa Jallow late. What I admired was that they played a lot of the young guys that weren't quite ready to play, but they were given minutes, they earned minutes, and those players are going to be counted on in a big way this year. I saw Micah Potter was transferring as of today. I know he was one of those guys in the mix as well, but you're going to have a couple of these guys step up, and someone's going to have to take kind of that end of shot clock, playmaking role that a Bates-Diop or Tate had last year. And I think a guy like CJ Jackson can. I think Andre Wesson could be a impact defender, but Musa Jallow, Kyle Young, I mean, those are guys I'm excited to see develop, and especially having a guy like Dockich, forgive me, first name, Andrew Dockich, going from a contributor to a GA would be an interesting transition.
And like you said, those guys got to step up. Who's going to be the go-to scorer? I mean, I think it's going to be CJ Jackson, how well he'll do it. We'll see. Musa Jallow is going to have to take a step up, and Kyle Young is going to have to take a step up. I know the staff is really big on the big kid, freshman Jaden Lee. I believe it's Texas kid. Mm-hmm. Texas kid, really highly recruited and whatnot. And then Caleb Weston inside. he's a sophomore. I mean, his body just keeps getting more and more toned, losing that baby face, starting to look more mature. He's a kid you can throw it to on the block and can create offense for you in some different ways. So he's going to give them another presence offensively. It's just, they're a team in the Big Ten, such a physical league. They're going to have some growing pains. They got a lot of talent. I think Ohio State, the one thing you want to really talk about is they've got a ton of momentum right now in recruiting. So they had a hell of a first year under Holtman. They got to have a good year this year, and that's just going to continue the recruiting momentum that they're starting to generate looking into, 3-4 years down the road as they try and compete day in and day out, Michigan State and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the trademarks of a Chris Holtman team is just going to be how they defend. I think every year, if you look at where they're picked in a poll, and for sake of this conversation, let's say they are picked 8th, I would always bet on a Chris Holtman team to perform better than what their talent says they are. I think if you put him against another coach with equal talent, Chris is going to find a way to get the most out of his guys. And it's going to have to be another one of those years like last year before they get that offensive talent in the next recruiting class.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, speaking of teams with transition in terms of personnel, we hit the 3 Ohio teams looking at the high major level still, crossing the river, University of Kentucky. They're accustomed to it. They have change in personnel every single year. By Kentucky standards, you could argue that this year they have less than normal, maybe. 26-11 last year, NCAA Sweet 16. We're going to talk about the preseason poll nationally in a little bit, but Kentucky right now is number 2 in that preseason poll. By their standards, only lost a few guys to the pros. Kevin Knox, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Amadou Diallo being the really notable ones. Return P.J. Washington, return Quade Green, return Nick Richards, have all these freshmen. Obviously, the guys you talk to in the NBA scouting world have probably seen a lot of Kentucky. So what do you think we can expect?
I think the freshmen get a lot of notoriety, and it's well-deserved. But guys like Quickly and Higgins and Hero are all, top-level guys. But the guy I'm really excited to see come into Kentucky is a little different than what they've had in the past, is Reed Travis. He's a guy I feel like has been around forever. I believe he's a 5th-year graduate transfer out of Stanford. Looks like a tight end, carries himself, older guy. You're going to have a 2 guys, I think, in a Quade Green and a Reed Travis that are going to be some of the leaders on that team, specifically early, on Tuesday Night Champions Classic. I think that's going to be an intriguing story, as you have all these young players, but you also have a veteran. I think they have all the talent in the world in that freshman class, but I think they need that guy to tie it together.
I love Reed Travis personally. He was 2014 Super Showcase, played with Howard Poly Panthers. Him and Tyus Jones played on the same team and took down Each One Teach One with D'Angelo Russell and all those guys. So he's been a winner for a long time, and I really like to see him coming to Kentucky. That'll be really interesting, like he said, to kind of mesh with those seniors.
Another team that they beat in that tournament in Orlando in the Super Bowl was the Corey Albertson GM, Trey Potter coached Ohio Phenoms. And I remember going into the game, T-Pot was like, well, we're not going to let Tyus Jones go off. And, we had all guards, so there's not a whole lot we're going to do with Reed Travis anyway. But I'd seen him a little bit at the Peach Jam, so I told Trey, I'm like, big kid's a pretty good player. And at the half, Tyus Jones has about 10 assists already, but he probably only had 2 points. And our kid's like, man, we're locking him up. I'm like, it's halftime and Reed Travis has 30. So he's been a good player for years. But, the other, like I said, Reed Travis, animal, P.J. Washington, kid with a lot of heart, had a big freshman year statistically. It had some up and downs, but had a big year. Green is really kind of a calming presence, not as talented as quickly as Higgins, or, maybe even not as talented as a Tyler Harrow, but will help them. Nick Richards was not ready last year. I don't know if he's gained any weight. It's interesting to see what he does this year. But the kid, if you talk to Kentucky people, they like E.J. Montgomery's talent, but they really like the kid, Keldon Johnson, Huntington Prep kid, just a tough kid on the wing. Very similar to some guys that Cal has had in the past, and be maybe most interested to see what he does tomorrow night against Duke. He's not going to back down.
Yeah, I agree. That's the benefit of having such a showcase early in the year, especially with as many freshmen. It's an even playing field. They're trying to establish themselves and kind of feel each other out as teammates as they are opponents.
The Kentucky-Duke game tomorrow night is basically a replay of the last 2 McDonald's All-American games. Not a lot of college experience, but a lot of high-level talent, just with some really good coaching mixed in. So that's going to be a fun one. Let's talk about Louisville. Kentucky's biggest rival, even though they're not in the same conference. Changing of the guard in the truest sense of the word. Obviously, the legend Pitino out the door. Chris Mack taking over has, like Holtman did at Ohio State, generated just a ton of recruiting buzz in a state, in a city that loves recruiting talk. Through all of the crap last year that they had to deal with, even though they had more talent to finish better, they go 22-14. They go to the NIT third round, but this year they're picked 11th in the ACC. And, with Chris Mack, it's like, you lose some talent. You've got the Louisville turmoil, and to top it all off, you got to play in the damn ACC.
There's a lot of dynamics at play. I mean, anytime you take over a program,
Ray Spalding goes pro.
Yeah, you're going to have some deflection. People are going to leave. You're going to have some new entries, but you have that choice of are you going to take transfers? Are you going to try to get freshmen late? Are you going to take JUCOs? And I think Chris and his staff had the right approach, that they've really attacked the 2019 recruiting class, and they've been incredibly successful. I know, their staff's been incredible. I think Mike Pegues on his staff is one of the most underrated assistants in the country. That being said, there's a whole different dynamic this year for sophomores, Malik Williams and Jordan Nora, where you're taking a guy that was recruited by a Rick Pitino staff, coached by a David Padgett, and now he's coached by Chris Mack. They've had 3 coaches in 3 years. And a guy like Malik Williams is special. He's a special talent. NBA level talent, but he's also probably heard 3 different voices with 3 different messages. And it's a question of how much is a guy like that going to buy in. I think on the perimeter, they're going to have a chance to compete. I like Darius Perry and Dwayne Sutton. VJ Kings, man, he's hot and cold. When he's hot, he's really, really good. It's more of the physicality. How are they going to compete inside? And especially in the ACC, where there's such a small room for error.
Zero error. And VJ King is an NBA offensive talent. He certainly has every single tool. If you talk to an NBA scout, what they want to see, he's got to do it offensively. And he can't defer. And that's maybe one of the criticisms of him in Louisville so far. And they've had kind of alpha male guys who've gone to get shots, like even a Quentin Snyder last year, Deng Adele. But VJ King is really, really going to have to do it. Dwayne Sutton's another guy, like not an ACC high-end talent. Local kid, started off at, was it Moorhead or Murray? Started off at, or Asheville even. Started off at a lower mid-major, transferred into Louisville, and, he's kind of got the heart that I think if he's going to be one of the leaders this year. But they're like all these teams we talked about. They've got a lot of unknowns. They've got talent on the roster. But with CMAC, I think they just want to try and generate momentum heading into next year. This isn't going to be a one-year fix at Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, the Louisville fans aren't going to want to hear it, especially after last year. But this year for Louisville Cardinals is all about culture. It's all about setting the standards, working towards the future in terms of current player development and recruiting. This is not about making NCAA tournament. It's not about winning the ACC. That would have been easier for Chris and his staff to come in and try to load up the roster for 1 year. They're doing it the hard way, but it's the right way. And it's going to pay off in years 2 and on.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about around the Big Ten, some of the regional programs that, whether they're going to have a good year or not, or people that get a lot of attention in our area. First, Indiana. You know the Miller family really well, having worked with Sean. Archie Miller's in his second year here, 16-15 last year. Only lose one guy from last year's team. Got a big-time recruit in Romeo Langford. Got some returning guys. They're really, really high on the Juwan Morgan kid. What can they do this year in the Big Ten?
To me, the Big Ten's pretty evenly matched. I mean, there's a number of teams up top, but if you look at, Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio State, like you can go down the line of who's all there. I don't know if there's really a favorite. I think Michigan would probably be it. Michigan State, those two. From there, I think Purdue has a lot of experience, but really with Indiana, you take a really, really good coach in Archie Miller with a good staff who gets guys to play as hard as anybody in the country. They're going to defend. They're going to play with effort. And now you have a post guy like Juwan Morgan and a perimeter guy like Romeo Langford. They're going to be able to score at a high level too. Where some nights, as we know in the Big Ten, it may not be the prettiest basketball anyone's ever seen. A guy like Romeo could go for 40, if Romeo's getting too much attention, Morgan could go for 25. Deron Davis. I mean, there's some other guys that, in their freshman and sophomore class, I think they get it. And I think they're starting to buy in. And if they buy into Archie and what he's preaching, there's no reason they can't compete.
Romeo is going to be a little bit like what you saw late in Crean's tenure there with James Blackman. Going to shoot a lot of balls. They need him to shoot a lot of balls, but has the talent, can score it. Huge recruiting prize to get in-state, had to get him. So he'll be the guy I watched. Juwan Morgan can do a lot of different things on the basketball court, but you mentioned Deron Davis inside, junior out of the Denver area, high-level recruit back in the day. He's had a good start to his career. They need him. They need Justin Smith at the guard position, sophomore, to really distribute the ball and everything. Michigan, I don't know how they're number 18 nationally. I think they're better. They lost Mo Wagner. They lost, a couple other starters, but they're national runners-up. They returned Xavier Simpson. They returned Charles Matthews. They got some other younger kids who played a little bit last year, have been a part of that winning culture in Michigan. I think they're better than 18, Coach.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, especially as an experienced backcourt with what they had last year, what Charles Matthews had at Kentucky, Xavier Simpson, Charles Matthews. I mean, experience-wise, like that's a huge, huge deal, especially in the Big East, or the Big Ten. The front court's more the question. John Teskey really had some good moments last year. Jordan Poole came on.
I like Isaiah Livers a lot.
And the question is, it's kind of with the rest of the Big Ten. Is everybody kind of has their top two or maybe three guys, but who's the fourth? Who's the fifth? Who's the depth? And in a league like the Big Ten, it's such a well-coached league, well-recruited league. Those coaches know who these guys are. I just don't.
Right. Well, Michigan State, on the other hand, they're 10th nationally. They're probably they are the most talented team in the league. And, they return Nick Ward inside. They return Cassius Winston, who feels like he's been in college forever at point guard. They return Josh Langford and Matt McQuaid, who can score the ball from the perimeter. Spartans have the most talent on paper in that league. Will that transition to them winning it? Don't know.
Yeah, they were intriguing last year with Jaren Jackson Jr. and Miles Bridges because they had so many guys that could come on and do more. Matt McQuaid didn't play a huge role, but you could tell he could do more. This year, it's time to show out. That's what the opportunity of college basketball is. You lose some guys early to the NBA, 2 lottery picks, and your depth's challenged. Michigan State always seems to have those guys ready to go. Those guys always get better. I can't wait to watch them play tomorrow night. Yeah.
When you got 3 guys, Ward, Langford, Winston have played more minutes in 2 years than some guys do in their careers. All 3 were highly recruited kids. All 3 are going to make a lot of money playing basketball, whether it's the NBA or another level. So when you've got a big 3 as good as that, plus a kid like Matt McQuaid, plus a big kid like Xavier Tillman as a sophomore in-state kid, they're going to be just fine in that league. Purdue, 22 nationally, lost a lot of kids from 30 and 17 last year.
Yeah, I mean, Carson Edwards is probably preseason player of the year, I think, even from the Big Ten, but definitely I think that's pretty obvious selection. Can score with the best of them. You talk about a guy that, kind of played in the shadows a little bit of Vince Edwards, Dakota Mathias. It's his year. I think Matt Harms last year got a lot of really good playing time. Noel Eastern.
Noel Eastern is a stud, and I watched him a lot on the travel circuit with Mean Streets out of Chicago, and he will be a big-time kid in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I was amazed last year with just his versatility of being a wing to a point guard, to kind of just as a handler. It'll be interesting of how they handle ball distribution between Carson Edwards and Eastern, and Ryan Klein's a guy to look for on the wing.
In Harms last year, they had the big Haas kid, and Harms saw spot minutes. He's a European kid, so I don't know what his background was. I think he's a junior this year. He's definitely not a senior. He's another one to watch. The little bit I saw of him in big games, I was super intrigued. Had a motor. I think he's from the Netherlands. I'd be interested to see what he does this year. Last Big Ten team, want to really give an in-depth preview on is Wisconsin. They've got a lot of Ohio kids. 15 and 18 last year. They lost no one. They had some injuries last year in Khalil Iverson and Dimitri Trice, both are Ohio kids. Got a first-team All-Big Ten guy likely, Ethan Happ. Brad Davison is a sophomore from the state of Wisconsin who was injured last year. So it's going to be different this year for Wisconsin.
Yeah, for Greg Gard, it's a big year because of how he got the job and how he's been able to develop that program. I mean, it's people in Wisconsin kind of understood, but now you're looking at a few years in, a sub 500 year. Ethan Happ, another guy who feels like been in college for
absolutely
6 years and probably has a better feel of what he can and can't do than anybody in college basketball, where most guys want to expand their range or take guys off the dribble. I mean, he's a very, very simple, efficient player, and it's fun to watch. The guys I like as well are Khalil Iverson and Demetric Trice, which are both Ohio kids, I believe. And
yep.
There's some stuff out there about finishing in the top 5 of the Big Ten. That would be a huge accomplishment for this team.
No one wants to play them, even if they're not preseason, whatever. And in the Big Ten, you talk to Big Ten coaches, no one ever wants to play them, especially there. And then the other kid I like didn't play, I don't think, any last year as a freshman. Another in-state kid, sophomore Kobe King, can really shoot the ball, can maybe create off a dribble or two. Like him a lot. Real quick, anybody else in the Big Ten, Northwestern, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, anybody else stand out at all?
I'm really intrigued by Minnesota. I mean, all the off-court stuff I think they had last year kind of really fell into them on the court. I know they have a pretty level roster, but a competitive roster. So it'll be intriguing of how they, take that next step, or if they've capped out what they are.
Okay. All right. Well, let's shift away from the Big Ten. Still want to finish a couple guys on the high major end that are considered in region. Let's start. I'm biased towards this team. Grew up a Hugs guy, so let's talk about West Virginia. 13th nationally. They're a tough team to rank, and that I think you could honestly argue that they maybe could be top 5, and you could also argue that they could be way lower. They've got a lot of guys with talent. They've got some really big hype with a kid like Sagaba Konate, but they lost Javon Carter from a team that was in the Sweet 16 last year. What do you think about the Mountaineers?
The first thing I think about with West Virginia is seeing guys in high school like Lamont West here and Beetle Bolden, and just see how much better they've gotten, how much more confidence they have working in the college level in a system where really the system, you're plug and playing guys in terms of pressure and pace and, press Virginia. I think losing Javon Carter is huge for this team, not just for what he did on the court, but that guy was the heart and soul of college basketball.
No doubt.
He made himself into probably a guy who wasn't quite talented to be an NBA draft pick, to be in a top 3 pick in the second round last year, which is, one of the best spots you could be at. And, with this team, it's going to come down a little like some other teams we talked about, where they have to be able to score. And they got some guys, in the paint that can score. Lamont West has proven to be a shooter, but who can go off the bounce and create the way they've had creators in the past?
Well, being a Cincinnati guy, I'm happy for Beetle Bolden. Respect a lot in today's era that he waited his time. There's a lot to be said for that. Lamont West is a kid. Issa Ahmad, Cleveland kid, missed some of last year with some academic problems, has all the offensive talent in the world. Hugs and them are going to be good. Kansas preseason number 1 in that league, but they're probably the second best team in that league. Butler picked 5th in the Big East, lost Keelan Martin, returned a lot of guys. Kamar Baldwin's a really good player at the guard position. Nate Fowler's a good player in the interior. Real quick, Butler.
I think Laval Jordan walked into a great situation last year, in terms of walking into a great culture. Like as a first-year head coach, you either want to walk into an incredible culture that you can continue, or you want to walk into a complete breakdown where you can break it all the way to the bones and build it up the way you want. He got the better of those two versions. In terms of the team they have, I mean, one of the guys I really like watching, Kamar Baldwin, recruited out of Georgia, I believe. And 2 years ago, I watched him, I think as a freshman, hit a game winner over Northwestern, over at Hinkle. And it was just one of those coming out moments for a guy. But yeah, I think Butler and Xavier are a little comparable of.
Second embarrassing story for me for the podcast.
I'm sure we'll get to more.
These were not even planned. Watched Kamar Baldwin play AAU with Atlanta Celtics. They had who did they have? Josh Langford. They had EJ Montgomery. They had Kobe Simmons played at Arizona in the pros. They had one other really high-level guy. They had another really high-level guy. Kamar Baldwin was like the 5th or 6th best player on that team. And because of that, I was like, he's just okay. Brian Snow tells me this kid is a stud. He's a great, great player and everything. And B. Snow got that one right. That kid's had a really good career so far at Butler. So
I think we all know here Brian Snow's never been wrong.
He's never been wrong, but he legitimately got that.
If there's one takeaway from this podcast, that's what we all need to understand.
Absolutely. Dayton Flyers. Not a lot of excitement in Dayton this year. Picked 6th in the Atlantic 10, 14 and 17 last year. Anthony Grant in year 2. Hopefully he'll make a leap forward. Josh Cunningham all league forward. Local kid Trey Landers can score in double figures, but Dayton's probably got some growing up to do this year.
Yeah, this goes back to a little bit of Archie Miller, too. There's this weird dynamic in college basketball and even college football, any college sport, that it's one thing to be really good, and it's another thing to be really good at the right time. Archie had it right. He had really good years. He had a good run in the tournament. Maybe had a lesser regular season, but he had an opportunity to leave. I know that was kind of the Ohio State-Indiana year, and Indiana came first. He kind of knew what was coming. Obviously I think it's McKinley Wright that was committed to Dayton that ended up at Colorado was a big loss.
Yeah, it's good.
I think they had another, incoming guy that was a top 150, 200 kind of guy that would have been a big deal. So when you lose one or two guys like that, it does really change your roster. For me, last year was kind of that culture year we've talked about with first year head coaches, except, Anthony Grant came into a good culture. They just didn't have the talent. So this year it comes down to Josh Cunningham in the post, Trey Landers on the wing, and I think freshman Dwayne Cohill at the point. And what can they do to improve? Dayton is still one of the best 2, if not the best job in the A10. And anything really not in the top 4 for them in a year, it's disappointing.
Right, and Dwayne Cohill is an interesting name to mention. He's a kid. If you're looking at what Anthony Grant's recruiting, Dwayne Cohill's a winner, and you don't really need to say anything more about that kid. So hope he does well there. Last high major team we want to talk about. We'll get into a few mids. Notre Dame, Indiana team, not picked 9th in the ACC. Again, that means you could win most conferences. 21 and 15 last year, but Bonzie Colson, who's now gone, was hurt a lot. Matt Farrell, who I love at the point guard, is gone. But they've got some interesting pieces.
Yeah, this is the kind of year why Mike Bray is a perfect fit for Notre Dame. And there's probably not a better coach and university fit than Mike and Notre Dame. It's really easy to be at a school, especially a pressure-packed school, when you're good. And this isn't one of the years they're going to be great. This isn't one of the years they're going to compete for the ACC. But similar to Ohio State and Chris Holtmann, they're one of those teams that always seem to be better than you think they are. 2 of the incoming guys that I'm really intrigued by are, Dane Goodwin and I think it's Robbie Carmody.
Carmody, yep.
2 coaches'
Columbus
kids.
kid and the Pittsburgh kid.
Yeah,
yep.
coaches' kids, similar in build, similar in ability, but, one's a better defender, one's probably a better shooter. The guy that's really special on their team, though, is TJ Gibbs. I mean, he had a few games, especially you mentioned Matt Farrell. When he was out last year, TJ took over and he had an opportunity. That to me is how their season's going to go. He's an incredibly talented wing, and I can see him really coming on this year.
The TJ Gibbs thing fascinates me. 3rd Gibbs brother to play in the Big East. I'm sorry, at a high major, and none of them play at the same school. But yeah, he's a high level talent. The DJ Harvey kid is a sophomore on the wing. I don't think he played a ton last year. A little bit I saw at Notre Dame. McDonald's All-American level NBA talent kid. See what he does. And then Jawan Durham, who was a top 10 prospect at times at the college or at the high school level, went to UConn, transferred out of there. He'll play this year. Interesting to see what he does. And I like what you said about tough program kids. Robbie Carmody, Dane Goodwin, tough program kids. Gibbs, tough program kid. And Rex Pfluger, California kid, is a senior this year. Feels like he's been there forever. He's a nice little role player. Let's run through the mid-major level real quick. Everybody knows the high majors, so let's just do a quick rundown on the MAC. Talking about the MAC East and probably all of the MAC. Is Buffalo the best team?
Without question. It's funny for me, even the days when I was in the MAC where it was so East heavy, And really now it's Buffalo on the East, and the next probably 3 teams all come from the West: in Eastern Michigan, Ball State, Toledo, no particular order. What Nate Oates has done at Buffalo, taking over from Bobby Hurley. I mean, what a great story for any coach out there that was, as an AAU coach or a high school coach who has an opportunity to become a Division I assistant, to become a head coach. He's one of those guys I like saying that, I knew him when. But, as you look at kind of the landscape of college basketball with what Buffalo did last year in the tournament, being expected very heavily to win, at least the East, if not the entire MAC this year, you're looking at one of the hottest names in coaching, especially in the Midwest, because people kind of forget Nate's in more of the Wisconsin, Michigan world than he is Buffalo. If you look at the rest of the league, Jack Owens did a great job at Miami last year, and it was kind of an under the radar hire. The rest of the East, to me, is kind of all packed together. It's a big year for Ohio. I think it's Saul Phillips, 4th or 5th year. Jason Carter's got to come back. Jordan Dardis has to take another step. Robbie Senderhoff has tough guards per usual, including Cincinnati-born Jalen Avery.
Jalen Walker's a really good forward.
Yeah, Jalen Walker. On the West, the West. When I was there, I remember one year that 3 teams had the opportunity to raise a banner at 7 and 9. That's changed. I think Eastern Michigan has done. Rob Murphy's done a great job instituting their kind of Syracuse zone system, recruiting to it. I know guys like James Thompson and Elijah Minnie are kind of what makes them go. But really, this league, comes down to who can knock off a team like Buffalo. And the 2 teams that I think have the best shot are James Whitford, Ball State Cardinals, and Toledo. With guys like Jalen Sanford, Willie Jackson, kind of a sleeper, and a 1-year grad transfer, Chris Darrington, out of Tennessee.
Right, I agree with everything you said. And Buffalo, maybe the one thing you didn't say is, as good as they are with the coaching, the culture, the way they play together, the other thing is they've got talent. CJ Massenberg might be the best scorer in the MAC, depending on the night. Nick Perkins is an ass kicker inside. If he's 6'9", the kid's in Michigan or Michigan State. He's from he's not from Detroit, but he's from Michigan. Tremendous talent. The other team we didn't talk about that'll, depending on who you ask, some people think they're the second best team in the East. Some people think they're 5th or 6th, is Akron. I know Chester really likes them. Jamond Ivey, a couple other guys. Jaden Sales from Cincinnati had a really big freshman year. And then Bowling Green's another one. People tend to look at them a lot of different ways. Maybe they're really good. Maybe they're not very good. Local kid for them, DiMaggio Wiggins, is supposed to have a really big year. So will be interesting to see them. And then talking about Toledo, Jalen Sanford's a good point guard, but Willie Jackson, Garfield Heights kid, sat out last year as a transfer. So we'll see what Willie Jackson does this year.
Yeah, the MAC to me is always fascinating because it comes down to really 2 things. One, who has the best player or 2 in the league, and which of those nucleuses are the most experienced. To me, I think Buffalo has both. So you look at the next step of, their preseason, first team, or excuse me, the preseason East team is 3 out of 5 Buffalo guys. On the West, it's pretty evenly distributed with Eastern Michigan with 2 guys. So, I mean, it's going to tell you a lot. I'm one of the guys I love watching in the MAC too, and just to get his name in here is Marion Jackson, also out of Cleveland, for Toledo.
Garfield Heights as well.
Garfield Heights, probably the reason, why Willie Jackson's at Toledo as well. But Toledo has a chance to be really, really good and potentially push Buffalo in the MAC.
And the other mid-major conference we want to talk about is the Horizon League. 3-way race for number 1 right now. I'm not going to worry too much about Illinois, Chicago, but they're in that 3. But in terms of Ohio people, Cincinnati people, Midwest people, Wright State, Northern Kentucky are very, very good teams. Wright State's Scott Nagy has a big and Loudon Love that can get a double-double. He's got a guard in Mark Hughes out of Youngstown, Ohio, that's really talented. NKU's John Brandon might have the best big in the league, and a Greater Cincinnati kid, Newport, Kentucky, Drew McDonald. Lost some bodies from last year's championship team, but those 2 teams are rivals in their proximity, and they're going to go at it.
I think one of the great stories that probably didn't get enough play last year was, especially in Southwest Ohio, how good Wright State and Northern Kentucky are. Last year, obviously the high majors with UC and Xavier and Ohio State getting all this love, and Kentucky, and well deserved. But to me, one of the best games I went to last year was a Northern Kentucky Wright State game, because you have two bigs going at it, in Drew McDonald from Northern Kentucky and Loudon Love from Wright State. Two incredibly well coached, tough, physical. Kind of neither team has a glaring weakness. They're athletic. They could they could be a little more athletic. They shoot it. They probably shoot it a little better. But like, you're talking about two incredibly well coached teams, programs. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Wright State get to the tournament. A little flash from the Billy Donlin years with a Mark Hughes and a Parker Ernsthausen still around. This year to me, Wright State's a little better, but it's going to come down to some weird road game, in the middle of December, January, where it's 18 degrees outside and there's 1,500 people in the stands, and one team's not
the
going to show up.
The conference tournament has been wild there.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I went up a few years ago and saw Wright State in the finals back before they, before I think it was the last year at Joe Louis, Reno, which is probably a positive. But to me, it's a 2-horse race. I know USC got some votes here, but I think it comes down to Wright State, Northern Kentucky, and I would bet Wright State pulls it off by a game.
Whoever wins that conference tournament, wins that league, is going to have a chance to make a second weekend in the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's not going to be an easy out.
No, not at all. I mean, one of the things that I harp on, and having spent time in the MAC, I think it's something I was passionate about. But I think mid-major teams are way too obsessed with RPI, which I know now it's NET, whatever the new metric is. At the end of the day, if you win the MAC, you win the Horizon, you're going to be a 14 or a 15 seed. If you have a great year, you're a 13. But all three of those have a chance to win games. Both of Wright State and Northern Kentucky have enough experience. Northern Kentucky, to me, seems a little younger. I don't know how Chris Shoemate and John Brandon and the rest of the staff do it, as much turnover as they've had. But to me, along with Nate Oates, I think John Brandon's one of those guys that's going to have a chance to move this year if he chooses. I know there were some opportunities out there last year, and they may not have been quite what was expected. Northern Kentucky stepped up to keep him. But this year, if they take that next step forward, it could be his year.
Phone's going to ring. And I mean, just one last thing on that is you look at Buffalo, coming out of the MAC, and not only did they win an NCAA tournament game, but they beat Arizona's ass. And I mean, that's the level of talent that comes in that league. So, well, that's the regional. Let's just do a quick 5 minutes here and talk about the national. Let's go over the preseason poll real quick. I'll run through it. Kansas is number 1. A lot of interior talent. Udoka Azubuike, Silvio De Sousa with Gerald Vick. The Lawson brothers transfer from Memphis. They're eligible. Number 2, Kentucky. We talked about them. Number 3, Duke. Maybe the 3 best freshmen in college basketball, which is crazy, unbelievable recruiting class. People are saying RJ Barrett's a once-in-a-generation level talent. Number 4 is Gonzaga. Number 5 is Virginia. Number 6 is Tennessee. Rick Barnes really has people excited down there. Second-ranked team in the SEC. Number 7 is North Carolina. Little more talent than they have last year. Not a lot of necessarily high-end NBA talent outside of probably Nasir Little, the freshman, but a very, very good team. Number 8, Villanova. I know they lost a ton of guys. I still think they're better than 8. Those guys know how to win games. I know Phil Booth had a huge scrimmage whoever they played against. So high major. I saw he had like 45 points or something. Nevada's 9. If you watch Cincinnati, you know what they've got. The Martin brothers and Jordan Caroline. We talked about Michigan State at 10th. Another team I like is Oregon. They have a lot of talent on paper. I like Auburn has a lot of talent on paper. What do you think about the national poll, Coach?
I'm not big on preseason polls,
right,
especially, but what I like this year is you have the 4, Champions Classic 4 that seem to be in there every year. But you have a team like Gonzaga that is not there every year, but it's great to see. You get a team like Virginia. People kind of forget how great they were last year in the regular season and even the ACC tournament until the UMBC loss. But then a team like Tennessee, who's back, who to me is SEC basketball has been on the rise the last couple of years, having 2 teams in the top 10 that aren't Kentucky and Florida, and Auburn, biting on their heels is a good thing for college basketball. And then having a school like Nevada, so you have Gonzaga's not a mid-major. Nevada's a mid-major plus, but you get some different blood, you get some different feel for it. What you have, though, is a lot of experience. These teams have all won before, whether it's with these players or, at least there's a few veterans intertwined. And that, to me, is what I'm looking for this season, because we all get excited about freshmen, but really it comes down to some of the upper class guys that pull their team along, especially early in the season.
It's interesting you mentioned Gonzaga and Nevada, because you look at the top 10, those are the two West Coast teams. Oregon's right on the cusp, but you don't see Arizona, you don't see UCLA, USC, Washington, California. Those teams are either going to be down or average. You don't see, not that they're West Coast, but you don't see a team like a Texas. On that side of the country, Nevada and Gonzaga have the eyes of the West Coast.
Oh, I agree. I mean, we're used to seeing so many ACC teams, but even if you go down to 20, 25, you get teams like TCU, Clemson.
Dixon's doing a great job.
Yeah, Clemson, to me, just does a great job. I think the job, Washington's doing, Mike Hopkins coming over from Syracuse, I thought that he had a great season last year for everything what it was, but you have some of the tougher jobs, I think, with like a Virginia Tech, Mississippi State, some of them in there as well, speaks to, staying power of some of these coaches that may have been on a proverbial hot seat, giving us, another year.
Mississippi State has top 10 talent.
Right. And
as does Auburn in that league.
Yeah. And they'll defend. It's just how, can they have a sense of consistency? Loyola Chicago, I think, is being overlooked a little bit. I think in these polls are 26, 27. But, going back to, the MAC, a team like Buffalo is getting votes in both of these. And so that's what's special about college basketball is you have a good run, you have a good season, your school gets that respect, but they probably still aren't getting enough.
And then two other teams I want to mention real quick that I'm interested in watching, both in the ACC, which is Syracuse and Florida State. That league is so top-heavy, loaded with talent. Let's see here, Duke, Virginia, North Carolina, all in the top 7, but Florida State and Syracuse, a lot of talent on that roster. Tyus Battle at Syracuse, fun to watch.
Yeah, the other one I get really excited about in the ACC is Clemson. Brad Brunell got a deserving, proper extension this year, and I think he's doing it the right way. Talk about a guy at the right place at the right time.
Gets no love. And then, I don't know, anybody else you think is going to?
I mean, I one of the bigger stories for me this year is also going to be some of the FBI trial stuff of some of the names that have come out. There's a lot of these teams in the top 25 that are these players going to make it all year? Are they not? How are schools going to handle some of this? Typically as a society and the NCAA member schools tend to punish kids without really asking questions, but then for some reason that doesn't also go to coaches. So the more and more we learn from all this, I'm kind of intrigued of how that is an underlying factor. But, another school, like you always root for good guys, like a guy like Tim Miles, getting that team over the hump. I think it's Nebraska's year here.
Very highly thought of in the Big Ten right now.
Yeah, really highly thought of and deservingly
tough job.
So. Again, another guy that's probably been stuck with for 2 years and will reap the rewards. But outside of that, it's ready to toss it up and get started.
You know who else has one more team before we wrap up here that has talent, and I don't know a whole lot about him top to bottom. Will Wade, LSU. A lot of talent down there. Interesting to see. They might have a top 5 pick. Nas Reed probably right there, if not top 5. Tremont Waters, big-time point guard. Javonte Smart, LSU. Has the ability in an SEC that has a lot of pros.
Yeah, it's great seeing 4 or 5 SEC teams all in the mix.
Mm-hmm. Alabama's got talent too, not projected very high, but has talent. So, well, cool. Well, Coach, thank you very much for coming on. I know that went a little long, but appreciate your insight. I think we covered a whole lot of teams here, and that was great information.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that was Brad Konerman, basketball aficionado out of the Cincinnati area. For Jason Morrow, I'm Corey Albertson, Triple Double Podcast. Thanks, guys. This podcast is brought to you by PlayEasy.com. For players, coaches, or casual athletes looking to book a sports facility, as well as owners and managers of sports facilities, PlayEasy.com is the new one-stop site for streamlined services. If you're looking for a place to practice, play, host your tournament, camp, or other, simply go to PlayEasy.com and create a booking request for your area. Your request will go out to surrounding facilities who will respond with their best offer. Once you receive the offer that best fits your needs, book the facility and you're ready to play. For facility owners and managers, PlayEasy puts the power in your hands to maximize the usage and visibility of your facility. Register your facility for free today at PlayEasy.com. PlayEasy.com is the booking site built by athletes, coaches, and facility managers, and is proud to help bring you the Triple Double Podcast. This podcast is also brought to you by Anago Cleaning Systems. Are you tired of struggling in a dead-end job? If so, Anago Cleaning Systems has what you're looking for, an opportunity to go into business for yourself, but not by yourself. With franchising opportunities available for as little as a $2,500 down payment, purchasing an Anago franchise has never been easier. Once you own your Anago franchise, you're licensed to clean commercial facilities all around the greater Cincinnati, Dayton, or Columbus areas with the support of Anago's sales, quality control, operational, and accounting staff. Call 513-332-0033 today for your opportunity to be your own boss and grow your own commercial cleaning company under the guidance of Anago's proven and successful system. Again, call 513-332-0033 to learn more. With Anago, your future starts today.